Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to our session, our virtual session. We would have loved to have been down there in New Orleans and meet you in person, but things being what they are, that's not possible, so we'll do this virtually. So the topic of the session today is retaining students, a field-tested framework of prediction and prescription. So what we're going to do today is we'll start off talking about some of our work with the state of Wyoming community colleges, including building a fairly accurate predictive model of whether or not a student will persist into the next semester. Then we'll shift gears and we'll talk a little bit about what it would be like to build a model that would not just predict whether a student will persist, but will actually recommend the right prescribed actions to take that would have the best outcome for those students. So before we get started here, let me talk a little bit about who we are, and then we'll dive in. So Mike and I both work for Cognitel. Cognitel is a data science company, and we focus on helping organizations and companies extract intelligence from their data. We have a special emphasis in working with the data that institutional researchers use day in and day out. Hence, this is why we're at the conference. Mike Barber is my colleague. He's our lead data scientist, and he comes to us out of the e-commerce world. Mike spent time with PayPal, eBay, StubHub, some of these companies, and he has some machine learning models that are actually still in production at some of those companies. But he's come over to Cognitel, and he's helping us work with data in the education space now. My name is Matt Swaffer. I'm a software architect. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. My most recent emphasis is in using artificial intelligence and applying that to solving problems with software. I have a background in educational psychology. My PhD is in ed psych, and my area of research interest is the cognitive psychology of human learning. So with that, now that you know who we are, I'm going to turn this over to Mike, and I'm going to let him kind of walk us through the broad portfolio of things that we're doing up at the state of Wyoming community colleges and talk about some of that predictive modeling.
Today I want to talk to you about some work that we've been doing within Wyoming, and specifically in partnering with the Wyoming Community College Commission. The Wyoming Community College Commission manages 7 community colleges, and they're all very geographically dispersed, and they're all fairly small. Some institutions have enrollments within the hundreds, some of them many more. But this is due to the state population in itself. So Wyoming as a state has a state population of approximately 500,000 people. So what that means is they're smaller institutions, they're more geographically dispersed, and smaller institutions mean smaller enrollments, and smaller institutions means less data on students and less staff to actually process the data. So many of the IR offices within Wyoming community colleges have only 1 to 2 full-time employees. And so those constraints make retention modeling difficult. And in the past, those attempts have failed, and they failed due to a numerous amount of reasons. Some of them have been to the extent of, or the reasons that students are, there's just not very many of them within the state of Wyoming, so it's hard to build profiles, as well as it's hard to do so within offices that only have, like I said, 1 or 2 full-time employees. So what we have done within Wyoming and within the Wyoming community colleges, with all 7 of them, we've initiated basically an IR research group. And so the IR research group, the intent of it is, because Wyoming is so geographically dispersed, the intent of the IR research group is to be able to share knowledge. When there's institutions that only have 1 IR, that IR can benefit with collaborating with institutions that have 3 or 4, for example, or just sharing in some of the same things. So what we've done is we've established basically an annual data science workshop to where we've gone in and shown how to use data science techniques like R and Python, and specifically on data that is within the institutions. So that seems to be really helpful because it allows the IRs to be able to connect the techniques of EDA and machine learning and other techniques to their data and actually bring insight out of their data within a couple of days within our workshop. We also hold weekly brown bag trainings, and those brown bag trainings consist of going through data science books, going through data science papers and techniques, as well as highlighting projects that we all collaborate on together. As well as collaborating within brown bags and workshops, we also have these one-on-one collaborations that we work with each institution with. And I say within the slide that all institutions benefit from it, because what we've been able to do within this research group, which I think is fairly special, is that we've been able to establish research and produce results that benefit all the institutions and not just one institution. So when Cognitel partners with institutions and specifically with community college commissions, which consists of multiple community colleges, then our goal is to try to bring about change and insight into institutions that they all can benefit from. So an example is a dashboard that is done within one institution. While it's being developed in a one-on-one collaboration, we've been actually producing those dashboards such that they work for all institutions. So you can see the benefit of kind of working within a one individual one-on-one technique that then scales up. And so we provide data science training, and specifically data science training that's unique to the institutional research domain. So we provide data science, machine learning model, applied statistics, and it's all educational data focused, basically training on your data. We believe that training on these techniques on your data is the best way to come about out of that training with something that's useful that you can put within your tool belt and you can utilize weeks or months later. So we do this within R, Shiny. We do it within Python. We also provide what we've been calling educational intelligence reporting. So this is it's not really BI. It's not really typical business intelligence, but it is educational intelligence. So these are reports on enrollment. These are reports on applications. What are they going to look like in the fall, as well as some predictive modeling techniques of what they might look like in the spring, given everything that's going on. And I really want to highlight this ability to collaborate and to collaborate with each of the community colleges, such that we work on projects that bring about specific insight of their institution that then other institutions within the state at least can benefit right away. And so we do this by designing, developing, and prototyping prototypes and models. So prototypical data pipelines. So we've designed and developed data pipelines to SIS systems, colleagues, ODS. We've also been looking at Banner, as well as we've developed data pipelines for LMS systems, and we're currently in the process of researching additional data pipelines to additional data sources and alternate data sources, to be honest with you. So talking about basically prototyping pipelines to SIS and LMS. And then from LMS, the reason that we created a data pipeline to LMS systems is because we believe in our studies that, and some experiments that we performed recently, that LMS, specifically LMS has student behavior data. It has what we've described as a pulse on student engagement. And so we've taken basically a set of hypotheses, and we actually quantified them within a set of studies by applying several different models onto data sets that included SIS only data, that included LMS data, and then we were able to measure basically the value of LMS data when we did that experiment, as you can imagine, it requires a set of feature engineering, and feature engineering is taking raw data and it's turning it into something that can be used to then measure. Examples of feature engineering include taking data that counts the number of times a student logs into a system and figures out basically how frequent as well as how long and other additional information that can be measured. So it's extracting information out of data. So that's how I kind of describe feature engineering. And we've done that with both SIS and LMS data. And then from that feature engineering, we've taken those features and we've developed several machine learning models. And we've used these machine learning models to evaluate, how well does machine learning work on just SIS data, and how well does machine learning models, how well do they work on data that contains both SIS data and LMS data. And again, we believe that the LMS data is indicative of student engagement. And so taking that data and augmenting models that were built with just SIS data, does it bring about additional model lift? And what we found is that it does. In fact, it's significant. So in the studies that we've done throughout the Wyoming community colleges, LMS data seems to have a significant correlation to student success. And as you can imagine, just simple things like a student's willingness to look at the course syllabus within the first week of classes. That seems to be really, really high of how engaged a student might be. So some of the things that we look at are like I was mentioning before, is routine of the LMS system, is how frequent do they use it, how long is it, what time of day do they look at it, as well as we look at the activity around the submission of quizzes and assignments. As you can imagine, procrastination may or may not be indicative of student success. In some cases it is, in some cases it isn't. It isn't, right? It depends upon the student. As well as looking at student engagement of whether they actually participate within a discussion. So did they actually post questions, or did they even read discussion topics? So what we found with examining LMS data on top of SIS data is that we found that the mean model accuracy increased between 10 to 20%. And so that's really significant to us, and we were actually able to quantify this within the number of students within Wyoming. And so being able to quantify how much data is worth in the terms of students, and when I mean by in the terms of students, I mean accuracy actually relates to, in both a positive way and a negative way, of students that counselors can interact with to try to prevent them from leaving school. And so, and I say a positive and a negative way because you want to make sure that the student counselors are engaging with the students that are going to drop out, that have that tendency that they are going to drop out, and you want to make sure that they're engaging with the right students, and such that those students that aren't necessarily going to drop out, you don't want to necessarily engage them as well. So there's as you know, within machine learning, there's both sides of the coin as you classify things. So, and that's what I'm referring to with false positives, or in the statistical type 1 error. So what we were able to show is that augmenting SIS data with LMS data has been able to show a significant improvement within predicting student retention, as well as it also reduces the false positives, therefore targeting the counselors onto students that necessarily need intervention. So what have we learned from our approach? And that's what I really want to share with everyone today. So I've already said we've increased model performance significantly by using LMS data. We've reduced the false positives. We want to target the right person for the right intervention, etc. We've been partnering with IR departments, and we find that yields specific domain insight that can be used within modeling. And I think that that's really important in that I'm not sure that we would have been as successful if we did not partner with IR departments. And that partnering with IR departments leads to insight and an understanding of the data that I don't think that we would have otherwise. So we've found that through our studies and through our sets of experiments, our empirical results were that predicting student retention using only SIS features doesn't work very well, at least within Wyoming community colleges. And so there's several reasons why this might be. The SIS features capture more demographics, high school GPA, whether they were a first generation student, and those things are important, but I don't think they're as important as features around student behavior or student engagement. So what we have found in our attempts of doing this is not all instructors and not all courses and not all institutions use LMS systems the same way. As you can imagine, some instructors heavily invest within the use of the technology within their classrooms, and some barely use it, if not at all. COVID-19 kind of changed that for us in that it forced every instructor to move their courses online. But even that has some changes, and we can certainly talk about later and maybe at another time. LMS data is incredibly important within not just trying to predict student retention, but also within analytics and reporting, because LMS data is what I've seen is the pulse of the student body if it's used predominantly within the classroom. So from our modeling efforts, we have found that if you can target the right student and you can get that information into the hands of the counselors and the people who perform interventions, it works. Interventions work, and what we have seen specifically within spring 2020 is that, and due to COVID, is that using information out of LMS and contacting students that no longer appear to be participating in their courses and their online courses work. It works. So whereas we were expecting a significant amount of students to drop out this past semester, what we have found is that because of interventions, because the counselors are reaching out to the students and getting hold of them, that we've seen a 40% decline within dropouts of spring 2020 over spring 2019. So that I think is highly indicative of how important LMS data is and how it can be used in such a trying time. So not only can LMS data be used for student success, but LMS data can also be used to help instructors as well. And as we've seen within this new COVID world that we're in, as instructors, some who have never taught online in the past were forced to teach within an environment that they've never been in. So we can use LMS data to try to help those instructors and try to pinpoint areas of which they might be able to use the tools to improve their instruction. So the benefits of this approach. So partnering and training IR offices has led to collaboration that has been able to produce data pipelines to SIS systems and LMS systems, as well as starting to prototype pipelines into additional alternate data systems. We've been able to produce analytics and in the form of dashboards and in the form of both descriptive and predictive analytics, as well as predictive models in the form of retention, etc. And so the benefit of our approach of partnering with IR offices, as I was leading to before, is the fact that IR's institutional research is a domain that's very specific and has a great deal of nuances to navigate that someone within the IR office that's been doing this for a while and is heads down within the daily reporting knows how to do this and knows what the data means and knows how to manipulate the data in such a way that it is meaningful. And I would say that partnership has proven to be really valuable and fruitful in that it's allowed Cognitel and the 7 community colleges within Wyoming to combine and to curate several different and disparate data sources. So we've combined the SIS systems, the LMS systems. We're looking at combining Seaboard, the cafeteria and housing systems, as well as K-12 data and what I've been referring to as alternate data. So, using census data, workforce development data, unemployment data, etc., to try to determine and try to provide insight into those community college programs that will provide an impact specifically into the state of Wyoming for this project. And so what I'd like to say is that by partnering with the institutions, we're able to bridge between just data and just retention models to the provide probabilities, and we're able to take those probabilities and we're able to create what we call prescriptive interventions. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Matt right now, and he can talk about prescriptive interventions.
Okay, I want to thank Mike for walking us through some of the work we're doing with the State of Wyoming community colleges, including building those predictive models for student retention. So once we have that prediction, though, what do we do with it? Well, what we'd like to be able to do is build a prescriptive model that tells us which intervention is the most likely to succeed with each student. So how do we do that? Well, let's start at a 50,000 foot level maybe and talk about what we're currently doing and how we move on from there. So on the left side of this slide, you see that we've taken the data that Mike was talking about, combining LMS and SIS and other data sources together to build this predictive model. And the outcome of this predictive model then is a prediction. And so what we want to do now is we want to take that prediction and move over here and maybe use the same data, maybe combine it with other data, but now we're going to build a prescriptive model. And the idea here is this is going to give us a recommendation for what is the most appropriate prescribed action to take with this student. So let's drill down a little bit and look at this model, and this is going to be how we get there. So if we look at this, this is work that Robbins and colleagues did a little over a decade ago now, and they built this theoretical model that said we have interventions over here on the left, and so you can imagine your student success folks have all kinds of things that they can pull out of their toolbox. So you have academic skills interventions, you have self-management interventions, you have socialization interventions, they have first-year experience programs, they have lots of things that they can do. So I've listed some here to simplify the model a little bit. Over on the right-hand side here, we've got the outcome. And so the bottom right corner is this academic retention. This is our holy grail. This is what we want to get to. But we also know that if we are able to increase academic performance, we have a better chance of retaining those students. So you see the academic performance here has an arrow pointing down towards academic retention. So the model that Robbins and his colleagues put together acknowledged that probably there is some direct influence of an academic skills intervention on academic performance. So that's what this top line here represents, this arrow. And then they also theorized that probably all of these interventions here have some level of direct influence on academic retention. But what's interesting about their model and what they were really trying to get at with their research was, are there mediating factors that come out of the individual student characteristics? So in other words, in these middle boxes here, does the level of emotional control that a student has, does that have a mediating influence on an academic skills or a self-management intervention? And so they looked at things like emotional control and motivational control and social control. And they call these psychosocial and skills factors. And after gathering plenty of empirical evidence, most of us have probably seen a path model, they were able to fill in on each of these lines and put a number that associates and tells us what the level of mediating influence is on these psychosocial skills factors here in the middle. Let's dig into this model a little bit. So let's talk about the intervention categories. These are the tools that student success folks can pull out of their toolbox to help a student out. So when we talk about academic skills, we're talking about kind of the things that you would think of with an intervention. So teaching a student how to take notes, or maybe doing some reading remediation, or some of those kinds of things. When we talk about self-management, this is getting into the area of self-regulated learning. So teaching a student how to do their own learning. So doing some time management, getting into some of the motivation and self-concept issues. So this is a pretty broad set of interventions that we can use. The social interventions are designed to create a sense of belonging with the student. So you can encourage a student to join a learning community. You can encourage them to connect on social media. And these things make the student feel like they belong to the organization or the institution. We talk about psychosocial and skills factors, these PSFs. We have very similar categories here, but they're not exactly one-to-one. So let's talk about these. So emotional control, this is kind of your academic skills, and it leads directly back to some of those academic skills in terms of mediating, being a mediating factor. So here, what we're looking at is an individual level. How good is a student at studying? How good are they at problem solving and those kinds of things? Motivation control, this is, of course, motivation in the educational literature. It's a huge field. We can talk about a lot of things here. So goal focus, self-efficacy, this idea of conscientiousness, of course, that's a personality trait, but it's also this idea of being diligent and being, being very careful in your work. So motivation control is a big one in terms of individual factors here. Social control, this is the idea of engagement. So how good is the individual at engaging? So what is their level of perceived social support? What is their social connection? How good are they at teamwork? So these are all some of the PSFs that we can look at the individual level to see how well those interventions that we looked at will be mediated and actually translate into the outcomes that we're looking for in terms of academic performance and academic retention. Now that we have a high-level understanding of these psychosocial and skills factors, we need to drill down and understand how we can understand, based on the behavior of the students, pull some data that will give us an understanding of the level of the PSF for each individual student, so that we can fit all this back into our model. So the ways we can do that are, we'll go through some examples here. So looking here, this would be the emotional control PSF, or it's closely related to the academic skills, so let's drill down on that. And here we have some buckets of things that we might call academic skills, right? Time management, preparation for exams, class notes, those kinds of things, right? Well, down here in the bottom, we can look at specific behaviors in the data and try to extrapolate and understand the individual characteristic of the student. So, for instance, time management, we could look at maybe frequency and consistency of LMS use, right? Might give us some indicator of how good they are at their time management. preparation for exams. Do they use the practice quizzes? Do they download the study resources that are available, right? So this is how you can kind of get an idea of how we are going to build a model of the individual characteristic of the academic PSF or for a student, right? Now, we're going to do the same thing with motivation. So this is a kind of a broad category of motivation called conscientiousness. So we look at like achievement motivation, we look at goal focus, we look at academic self-confidence, right? And now we're going to drill down, we're going to say, well, what if the student failed to pass a prereq course, right? That's going to block their path of what they're trying to achieve. Well, that might impact their goal focus, right? So we're going to look at that piece of data, and we're going to start to build a model of this student. Academic self-confidence could be related to just a single flag. Have they declared a major or not? If they haven't, maybe their academic self-confidence is low. They don't know why they're in school yet, right? So we're able to start building based on some of the data. We're able to extrapolate the behavior of the student and understand their level with this motivation PSF. We do the same thing with social, right? So we have these buckets here. We have perceived social support, social connection, teamwork. And if we look down here at some of these behaviors, maybe social media engagement, we have some measure of that. And we can say, well, they have a pretty strong social connection or a really low social connection, right? When you look at teamwork, maybe we dig into the LMS data again and we say, well, how much are they engaged on a group project? Or what is their success on group projects, right? So now we can start to build a model of this student. So the idea here is we want to take the behavior of the students, and looking at the data that is generated by that behavior, we can now begin to build a model and understand where the individual student is on these different PSFs. Coming back to our model now, you can see where all the pieces start to come together now. And we can, in these middle boxes, the emotional control, motivation control, social control, we're able to extract from the data behavioral information about the individual students, and then we can go back and overlay that information onto the empirical data that was collected by Robbins and colleagues, and then we can use that to build our recommendation engine that gives us the correct prescribed action for each individual student. So that's it for our presentation, and appreciate everybody showing up and listening to what we had to present here. Just to show you, we've got a couple slides of references here. So Mike and I have done quite a bit of work in this space, and we understand it pretty well. And so thank you, and Mike and I will stick around for a couple minutes, and we'll take in any questions that you might have.